Railroads fill a romantic place in American history. But for one small railroad that runs along the northern California coast, reality is much more discouraging these days. El Nino-driven storms have nearly buried the railroad under landslides and debt. In tonight's segment 2, Bob McKenzie looks at the travails of the Northwestern Pacific Railroad and the dedicated people who are trying to keep it going.
Running a small railroad is a tough business, even when everything is going well. This pint-sized railroad, the Northwestern Pacific, has been tooting gallantly along the edge of collapse for many years. That it is still in business is a tribute to the dogged determination of railroaders and railroad lovers. The Northwestern Pacific runs from Marin County up to Eureka. On its northern run, it crosses and recrosses the Eel River, running along one side of the river and then the other. The land the rails sit on is constantly in motion. In places, there are only a few inches of dirt separating the train from a long drop to the river. Now and then, the dirt slips away, taking the rails and the train with it. If those everyday problems weren't enough, the winter rains brought avalanches, burying long sections of track under tons of mud and rock. The NWP is struggling to dig itself out, physically and financially. Engineer Randy Peterson, like the other employees, hasn't been paid for 6 weeks.
Our last paycheck was February 23rd, and that was the second half of the check for the last half of January, so it's wearing thin, but...
What keeps you going?
Well, the old credit card so far.
Well, I imagine you could just quit this and do something else.
Well, yeah, it kind of gets in your blood. You like to kind of stick to a job and finish it.
The NWP hauls lumber, gravel, paint, packages, you name it. It goes to places the highway doesn't reach. The people who work on it believe they're doing something important. Charlie Vogel, another engineer, is hurting for a paycheck, but says he'll keep going.
It's kind of like the future. Without trains, what is the future about? And everybody hears that whistle. They come running. Some people get mad, some people get happy, but most of the time, when you're cooking down the tracks, having a good time, you're delivering the customers products to them, you're having fun at the same time, and you're making a living.
I explained to the engineers that it was very important that I stand at the front of the engine to get good television pictures. I didn't tell them this is something I've wanted to do since the age of 5. The Northwestern Pacific travels through some of Northern California's prettiest country. And through some of its oldest tunnels. This one was built in 1914, the year World War I began. Despite all its history, despite its value as infrastructure, the railroad almost went out of business in 1983 when Southern Pacific announced it was closing the line. That's when Ruth Rockefeller got involved. The retired school teacher fired up her home copy machine and lit a fire under the Interstate Commerce Commission, the Public Utilities Commission, and the state of California. The result was the North Coast Rail Authority, a state-owned company that took over the operation of the railroad and saved it. Ruth declines to take the credit.
I always had help from somebody along the line. There were times when I felt that I was standing out there holding a piece of track or rail in both hands trying to get it joined together. But no, people have been most supportive.
Though the state is backing the line, everyone understands that the railroad has to pay its own way. You're looking at the entire managerial staff of the Northwestern Pacific, President Jack Tremaine.
There's a lot of good people on this railroad. It's been tough because they're not getting paid right now, and they will get paid, but they're hanging in there, and there's no other people like these people on this railroad, nowhere.
FEMA, the Federal Disaster Agency, has promised $500,000 to help the line clean up the winter mess and catch up on its payroll. But the money has yet to arrive. It's by no means a sure thing that the Northwestern Pacific Railroad will still be with us 5 years from now or 10. But if it isn't, it won't be because a lot of people didn't knock themselves out to keep this little railroad alive. Here Willits, Bob McKenzie for the 10 o'clock news.
And still ahead on the 10 o'clock news, the weather forecast for the coming week.